On the 3rd of March 2023, when Latavia Washington McGee decided to go over to Mexico for a cosmetic surgery with a few of her friends, there was no way she could have predicted what would happen next.
Do not travel.
Cruzaron la frontera.
These sorts of attacks are unacceptable.
Disturbing video of 4
U.S. citizens
kidnapped at gunpoint
across the border.
Any criminal purpose
is one of the most dangerous in Mexico.
The FBI offering a $50,000 reward for the safe return of those 4 victims.
Word that those missing Americans may have been targeted by mistake.
They had crossed into Matamoros from Brownsville, Texas, and planned to be in Mexico for just a few days. However, they soon got lost. They drove around for miles, trying to find their way back. However, things started to take a scary turn when they realized that they were being followed. It turns out they had caught the attention of members of the infamous Gulf Cartel and were being tailed by several vehicles. Panic started to set in. They had no idea what these men wanted. Were they trying to rob them? Kidnap them? Kill them? They had absolutely no idea. As the 4 Americans in the vehicle became aware of their situation, they knew that they were at risk. They tried to escape the cartel members, but then they started getting shot at. The men chasing them meant business, and soon they had been run off the road and were kidnapped. CCTV video of the incident showed one of the attackers dragging people, 3 of whom were unconscious, into a white pickup truck right before it drove away from the scene. Immediately after the U.S. government got wind of the kidnapping of its citizens, it engaged the Mexican government. If there's one thing the whole world knows, it's that the United States does not play with the safety of its citizens. The White House released a statement condemning the kidnapping. In fact, the U.S. government went as far as announcing a $50,000 reward for anyone who could provide information leading to the whereabouts of the Americans. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby had this to say about the attack. Attacks on U.S. citizens are unacceptable, no matter where or under what circumstances they occur. The U.S. government suspected that the Gulf Cartel was responsible, and so they started to spy on them. They knew that the Mexican government would not be happy with this, but at that point, the end justified the means. The U.S. government has maintained a strong network of informants and has been keeping tabs on Mexico's many cartels. In fact, the government had announced a few days prior that they had successfully infiltrated the Sinaloa cartel. They were no doubt using every form of intelligence available to gather information on the whereabouts of the kidnapped Americans. They managed to get data that proved that the Gulf Cartel was responsible for the kidnapping, but that the higher-ups in the cartel weren't in any way happy about it. You see, one of the ways the cartel has been generating money has been through kidnapping of people and extorting their families of ransom money. It's done so well for them that it has actually become a big part of their operations lately. Their targets are carefully chosen, and if the family refuses to pay the ransom, or if they're slow with the payment, the victims get executed. It seemed to be what had happened in this instance, except for a few flags that proved that perhaps it wasn't. Number 1 was the fact that the 4 Americans were not even supposed to have been kidnapped in the first place. Cartels in Mexico are very particular about engaging Americans, especially with the knowledge that the U.S. government is very intentional about the safety of its citizens. Proof of this is the aftermath of a standoff in 1999 between 2 American agents and members of the Gulf Cartel. The agents had met with an informant in an attempt to gather intel on the cartels in the area where they had been confronted by members of the Gulf Cartel. Even though the agents and their informant had not been killed and had, after a moment of intense tension, been allowed to return to the U.S., the American government had come after the cartel with as much vengeance as they could, leading to the arrest and incarceration of many key members of the cartel. Certainly, the memory of this event had not faded, and the key figures in the organization wanted to avoid any form of confrontation with the United States. In leaked information from the wiretaps of the U.S. government, there were several conversations between members of the Gulf Cartel. In these talks, the cartel members discussed how the Mexican armed forces might respond to the kidnapping, flagging possible arrests and a rise of violence in Matamoros. They also spoke to their lawyers repeatedly, and they gave them the advice to remove all information related to the kidnapping from their devices. Another sign that this was not a regular case of kidnapping was the fact that the family of the victims had not been contacted. Usually, shortly after kidnappings, the cartel notifies the families of the victims and demands a ransom. In this case, there was none of that. Just radio silence and a lot of speculation. The most popular theory was that the Americans had been victims of a mistaken identity, and once the cartel members had them, they really didn't know what to do with them and panicked. Some claimed that the cartel had a personal vendetta against a person in the group. There were even claims that the kidnapping was a retaliation from the cartel on the United States. Whatever the reason was, no one was really sure of why the cartel had kidnapped the group of four on that day. For 4 days, there was uncertainty about the state of the kidnapped victims. And then, suddenly, the Mexican government announced that the military had conducted a raid and found the victims in a wooden shed on the outskirts of Matamoros, near Playa Bagdad. The kidnappers had left them there the day before. Unfortunately, 2 of the victims were already dead. Zindel Brown and Shaid Woodard had been killed by the cartel. Latavia McGee and the last person in the group, Eric Williams, were found alive. It seemed like the captors were giving them up as there was only one guard with them, and one of the kidnappers had told them that the whole operation had been a mistake and was a result of poor judgment aided by drugs and alcohol. The security forces took the 2 surviving victims to a clinic to be treated, as they were both found in pretty bad state. Eric Williams had even been shot in the leg. They recovered and were transported to the U.S. soon after. The bodies of the deceased were handed over to U.S. authorities later. Right after the victims were found, a lot started to happen all at once. The most notable of which was the Gulf Cartel coming out to claim that the kidnapping and murders were committed by rogue agents, basically distancing themselves from the attack. In a letter that has been verified as original, the cartel wrote, "The Gulf Cartel Grupo Escorpiones strongly condemns the events of Friday, March 3rd, in which, unfortunately, an innocent working mother died and 4 American citizens were kidnapped, of which 2 died. For this reason, we have decided to hand over those involved and directly responsible for the events who at all times acted under their own determination and in discipline and against the rules in which the CDG has always operated. In addition, the CDG asks society to remain calm because we are committed to ensure that these errors caused by indiscipline aren't repeated. The guilty parties will pay, regardless of who they are." This statement was released along with a photo of 5 men bound and facing the ground. It is speculated that these men were responsible for the kidnapping of the Americans and that they had been executed by the cartel. It was very clear from the statement and the info from the wiretaps of the cartel members that they were trying to avoid any form of conflict with the American government. They also seemed to want to protect their image with the public. The Gulf Cartel is brutal and violent, but they still benefit a lot from having the public have a good opinion of them. One of the reasons it's been so hard to get any info and arrest top leaders of the cartel is because the public helps to protect them. The cartel tries to project itself as a protector of the people, and to many people, they are regarded as just that. The stain from the kidnapping is one they don't want on their name. There's more that arose from this than just the Gulf Cartel denying blame for the kidnapping, though, as the president of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, disapproved of the U.S. spying on the cartel. Since the start of his administration in December 2018, he had been very vocal about U.S. interference in Mexico. In the aftermath of the events of 3rd to 7th of March, the Republican Party had proposed a bill that would enable the U.S. military to deploy troops on Mexican territory and label cartels as terror organizations. President Obrador sees this as a threat to Mexico's sovereignty. This has led to strained relations between the two countries. In its defense, the U.S. government had reason to believe that the Mexican government was compromised. Mexico has a long history of police officers, federal agents, and even members of the military being on the payroll of cartels. Any form of intelligence shared with the Mexican law enforcement could have made its way back to the cartel.